President Assad tells a German paper that Syria would do everything to remain strong and that a solution through dialogue is possible, but not with the terrorists. Lavrov asserts in a joint press conference with his American counterpart that terrorism and extremism would be combated in Syria, and Kerry asserts that the military scenario to solve the crisis in Syria is unacceptable. The third judiciary conference in Syria is held in the Ministry of Justice under the title The Judiciary Authority and New Thought.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our news for today. President Bashar al-Assad asserted that Syria would do everything to remain strong and that all the political decisions taken by the West during the past 10 years only supported this rule and this attitude.
In an interview with the German paper Der Spiegel, the president said that those who believed that they were isolating Syria in fact isolated themselves from the truth. The solution through dialogue was still possible, but not with the armed terrorists. The president asserted that the army and the people in Syria continue to stand together. We have no other option than believing in our victory and saving our country. The president said that the West today is supporting al-Qaeda terrorists from 80 countries. The president said the West understands reality very, very slowly, yet the West prefers to believe al-Qaeda rather than the government. The president said there were contacts with some institutions in Germany through channels that did not exist in the past. He pointed out that Germany and Austria had the more objective vision. This could contribute to the preservation of Europe's interests. The president said Syria was ready to receive German delegations to discuss real contacts that could be their starting points in their work. The president wondered how the interests of the West could be served while al-Qaeda continued to disrupt things in its backyard. After more than 2 years, the West should reconsider its policy and ask itself what it could gain from supporting the spread of chaos in Syria. The president said that the leaders of the opposition abroad are enjoying their stay in 5-star hotels and obeying the orders of those financing them. However, they have no base here in Syria. The president pointed out that many armed opposition members have withdrawn and returned home to fight side by side with the Syrian army. The solution is possible, but not with the armed terrorists. The president asserted that more than 100,000 displaced Syrians have returned home safely after receiving guarantees that the government would protect them. The president wondered who the opposition groups represent. Are they talking about themselves or about the people of Syria or about the states supporting them, like the US, Britain, France, Saudi Arabia or Qatar? When they claim that they represent the Syrian people, they should show this through the ballot box. The president said that the destiny of the president would be determined by the Syrian people because this country does not belong to the president alone, but to all the Syrian citizens. The president said that the American president has no right to issue judgments about Syria or to dictate to the Syrians whom they should elect as president. He asserted that the pain inflicted on the Syrian people comes from the explosives and booby-trapped cars brought to our country by the terrorist gangs. The president said that the government responded to the demand of demonstrators. Although their protests were not peaceful, there were victims among the soldiers and the police from the early beginning, yet the special committee amended the constitution in response to the demands of demonstrators. However, the country had to confront terrorism and to defend our people. The president described the UN Security Council resolution about chemical weapons in Syria as a good resolution that did not violate our interests. He pointed out that Russia would support Syria in the various fields because it is committed to the contracts signed between the two countries. This does not include the systems of air defense only, but includes other types of weapons. The Russians are Syria's real friends. They understand events better than the West. They are more independent than the Europeans who rely on the US. The president asserted that Syria has every right to obtain weapons to defend itself. Syria does not occupy anybody's land. He wondered why the world community does not object to Israel obtaining all kinds of weapons. The attitude of the West is not objective, but it represents double standards. That is why we do not trust the West. The president asserted that Syria believes that this region needs peace and stability.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stressed that his country and the United States will exert all efforts to help combating terrorism and extremism in Syria, noting that the Syrian government cooperates with the international experts specialized in dismantling chemical weapons. Following his meeting with his U.S. counterpart Kerry on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Indonesia, both Lavrov and Kerry confirmed determination to do everything to help combating terrorism and extremism in Syria. Russian Foreign Minister affirmed that Damascus cooperates well with the international experts, and we hope this cooperation will continue like that in the future, adding, "We have no basis to suppose that the Syrian government good cooperation will change." Lavrov asserted that there are enough bases to suspect that the extremist groups might foil the process, expressing hope that all parties, including the neighboring countries, will carry out the UN Security Council's demands and not to allow the chemical weapons reach non-governmental players and not to use their land to commit any terrorist acts. For his part, Kerry described his meeting with Lavrov as constructive and fruitful, asserting that the United States and Russia agreed on that a military scenario to solve the crisis in Syria is impossible and unacceptable. U.S. Secretary said, "We will work to hold the Geneva conference as soon as possible," noting that the conference could be held during the second week of November.
Our friends in the region, we consult regularly.
Welcome back. Units of the Syrian Arab Army defeated large numbers of terrorists and destroyed their weapons and equipment in the countrysides of Damascus, Aleppo, Daraa and Idlib. The terrorists belong to the so-called Jabhat al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Sham. Most of them carry the nationalities of Iraq, Libya, Tunisia and Nigeria. In the Damascus countryside, the Syrian Arab Army killed and wounded many armed terrorists and destroyed their hideouts through qualitative and concentrated operations in Al-Qaboon, Barzeh, Jobar, Zamalka, Douma and other towns nearby. In Aleppo, the army carried out operations that destroyed terrorist hideouts in several places. The army also foiled a terrorist attempt to infiltrate into the Carlton hotels in Old Aleppo. In Idlib, units of the army killed and wounded dozens of terrorists and destroyed their weapons and ammunition along the highway between Saraqib and Aleppo. In the northern countryside of Hamad, the Syrian army ambushed a terrorist gang, killing and wounding most of its members. In Daraa, the army destroyed terrorist groups and hideouts in several villages. In the Ministry of Justice in Damascus, the first judicial conference began its work under the title The Judiciary Authority and New Thought. The conference will discuss the measures and mechanisms taken for future development and the plans of reform and the relation between lawyers and the judicial authority. A delegation of the national opposition in Syria expressed support for Geneva II conference to reach political solution during a meeting on Sunday with Mukhtar Lamani, director of the Office of the UN's Envoy to Syria, Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi, in Damascus. In a statement to the journalists after the meeting, leader of the National Democratic Bloc, Secretary General of the Solidarity Party, Mohammed Abu Qasim, affirmed the support of the national opposition forces to holding the International Geneva II conference set to be held in mid-November to be a starting point to launch the political solution in Syria. For her part, Secretary General of the National Youth for Justice and Development Party, Berwin Ibrahim, pointed out that the meeting also touched upon the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the areas under the control of the gunmen. She highlighted that the national opposition has drawn out a roadmap to get out of the crisis, which was developed into a form of a plan for the solution, adding that this plan will be put forth at the Geneva II conference by the representatives of the national opposition. Russian President Vladimir Putin lit the Olympic torch of Sochi 2014, declaring the start of the Olympics from the Red Square in central Moscow, which will be carried across Russia to reach Sochi next February. Russia Today website reported Putin as saying in a statement on this occasion that the Olympic fire is the icon of the Games and the sample of peace and friendship that will be carried across our country. Putin stressed that this rally is very important because the torch will pass all regions of Russia and the whole world will see Russia as it is and as we love it. With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our site in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Vani Genjan, but after a short break.